Every war has rules, even in its cruelty. Lines men swear never to cross. But on the Eastern Front, a new weapon appeared. One that ignored every code, every instinct, every shred of human restraint. Attack of the Dead Men. Dawn, August 6th, 1915. A swampy fortress on the Eastern Front, Osowiec. A stone island drowning in mud and artillery smoke. For months, the German Empire hammered at its walls. Artillery flattened forests. Mines swallowed trenches. The air tasted of rot and stagnant water. Inside the fortress, barely 900 Russian defenders, mostly from the 226th Zemlyansky Infantry Regiment. Exhausted, sick, starving, but alive. Until that morning. At 4 a.m., the Germans released a weapon the defenders had never seen. A cloud. Green. Heavy. Crawling low across the ground like a hunting animal. Chlorine gas. Death in its purest form. It swept over the trenches, the fortress, the men. And for a moment, it looked like the battle was finished. It wasn't. Because what happened next should have been impossible. The Fortress of Bones. Chlorine kills from the inside. It burns the eyes, melts the lungs, turns breath into blood. Men drown standing upright. When the gas cleared, 14,000 German infantry advanced behind it. They expected silence. They expected corpses. And, in a way, they got exactly that. Rows of Russian bodies lay twisted where the gas had struck. Eyes blackened, faces blistered, skin peeling like wet paper. But in the trenches, something moved. Not many, just a few. Men who should have been dead, coughing blood, vomiting pieces of their own lungs, staggering like shadows. And then, they rose. The dead rise. Around 60 survivors of the 226th Infantry Regiment dragged themselves out of the gas-soaked trenches. They were barely recognizable as human, faces swollen beyond shape, skin burned green by chlorine, uniforms half-eaten by acid, soaked in blood. Most had no voices left, only a rasping, wet gurgle as shredded lungs fought for air. Their eyes were red, not from fury, from chemical burns. They were dying. Every breath was a knife. But they lifted their rifles, fixed their bayonets, and began to march. Bodies leaking blood from every opening, hands trembling, boots dragging through the mud. They marched. And the Germans, 14,000 fresh troops, stopped. Because what was coming toward them did not look alive. The impossible scream. Witnesses described a sight that broke the mind. Men with no voices, speaking only in choking moans. Men spitting fragments of lung tissue into the mud and stepping over it. Men whose uniforms had dissolved, showing raw, burned flesh underneath. Men who staggered, but did not fall. Men who should not have been breathing at all. Yet they advanced, dragging rifles, coughing blood in thick streams. Some slashed open their own shirts just to breathe. Some tied rags across their mouths to keep what remained of their throats together. Others didn't bother. They simply walked, slow, steady, unstoppable. A line of dead men, charging. And the German soldiers, trained, armed, unpoisoned, broke. They screamed, they turned, they ran. Some trampled each other, some suffocated inside their own gas masks. Some threw themselves into barbed wire, blind with terror. Because the figures coming out of the chlorine cloud were not soldiers anymore. They were something else. Something between life and death. Something that should not exist. Beyond the last breath. Leading them was Lieutenant Vladimir Kotlinski, 21 years old, his lungs shredded by chlorine, every breath fire and blood. Yet he gathered the remnants of his regiment and charged directly at the German stormtroopers, hand to hand, face to face, death to death. The Russians fought like men with nothing left to lose, because most of them had already lost everything. Lungs, eyes, voices, futures. The German line collapsed. Positions taken hours earlier were retaken by the dead. Osowiec's fortress survived not because its defenders lived, but because they refused to die. The price of rising. The aftermath was worse. Many of the Russians who charged collapsed minutes after the fight. Some died standing. Some suffocated, lying in victory positions, rifles still in hand. Some coughed themselves into unconsciousness and never woke up again. Those who survived the hour did not survive the days. Doctors wrote that their lungs looked as if they had been boiled. But the fortress held. The world remembers the name, the Attack of the Dead Men, a moment when bodies rose from poison and fought until the end. Silence after the storm. Osovets was abandoned weeks later, not defeated, but evacuated strategically. The Germans entered an empty fortress. They found gas-burned trenches, shattered walls, and bodies, dozens of them, frozen in positions of attack. One German officer wrote, "We fought men who were already dead." Another wrote, "No fear compares to the sight of the dying who continue to fight." For decades, German veterans spoke about that morning, the morning the Russians became something else, something darker, something beyond life. The will of the dying. History offers explanations. Anger, desperation, discipline, patriotism. But none of these answer the real question. How can men dying from chlorine, burning from the inside, stand, walk, and charge into gunfire? What holds a body together when flesh is melting and lungs are collapsing? What force drives a man forward when every breath is a blade? No physiology explains it. No doctrine teaches it. It is something else, something human, and yet not. Was it duty? Was it rage? Was it the last spark of life refusing to go out? Or did the gas open a door that should have stayed closed? What marches when the body fails? What fights when the mind is gone? What rises when breath ends? Maybe the Germans were right. Maybe the men who charged out of that chlorine cloud were no longer soldiers. Maybe they were something closer to legends, something closer to nightmares, something closer to ghosts. Echoes in the green mist. Today, Osovets is quiet, overgrown, forgotten. Birds nest in old bunkers. Grass covers trenches where men suffocated. Wind hums through rusted artillery, making a low, moaning sound, almost like breathing. Locals say that on foggy mornings, when the mist turns green in the early light, you can see shapes moving near the parapets, slow, staggering, as if rising from the ground. Maybe it's shadows, maybe imagination, or maybe some battles never end. Maybe the dead still walk the trenches they refused to abandon. Maybe the men who rose from the gas still march in the silence. The 226th Regiment, the defenders of Osovets, the dead men who attacked, ghosts of war. This is Ghosts of War. Join us next time as we uncover another unexplained battle, lost army, or legend of war. The past awaits its story.